Dozens of Palestinians killed by airstrikes in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister visits Washington. Could a ceasefire be in the works? Hello, I'm Arnold Knight, and this is The Heat. The carnage in Gaza continues, with dozens of Palestinians killed as Israel launches more deadly attacks. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting Washington, and he's met with US President Donald Trump at the White House. There is speculation that progress could be made toward a ceasefire. I will discuss all of that with our panel later in the show, but we begin with Gideon Levy, the author, journalist and longtime columnist with the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, talked with me earlier from Tel Aviv. Gideon Levy, thanks so much for joining us. I want to start with the latest killings that we are seeing daily in Gaza. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, hundreds of Palestinians have been killed while trying to get food at food distribution sites in the besieged enclave in recent weeks. Now, your newspaper, Haaretz, reported that soldiers were ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed civilians. How can this happen? These are women, children, men who are trying to seek food. What does it tell you about how the Israeli troops and their commanders view the Palestinians who are trapped in Gaza?
This happens when you lose humanity. This happens when you are totally convinced that there are no innocent people in Gaza, including not the newborn babies. This happens if you think that all the Palestinians are terrorists. This happens if you don't perceive the Palestinians as equal human beings like yourself. It is inevitable. It's after years of brainwash and after the trauma of the 7th of October, Israeli army, it's not only the army, by the way, it's also Israeli public opinion, it must be added, lost any kind of humanity, lost any kind of empathy toward the unbelievable suffer of the people of Gaza.
Human rights groups and others have accused Israel of committing genocide and of ethnic cleansing. The former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Almer has accused Israel of committing war crimes. He said in an opinion piece that was written in your newspaper, Haaretz, he said, and I'm quoting him here, "What we are doing in Gaza now is a war of devastation, indiscriminate, limitless, cruel and criminal killing of civilians. It's the result of government policy knowingly, evilly, maliciously, irresponsibly dictated." Those are very tough words from the former Prime Minister, tough language he's using there. Would his characterization resonate more with Israelis, seeing that it comes from a former Prime Minister?
No, not at all, because as I said, the Israelis, most of them, had built themselves a human shield, namely not to have any sensitivity toward the suffer of the people of Gaza, not caring about it, totally ignoring the international law, claiming the international law applies to any other country but Israel, because Israel is, as people say in Israel, is a special case, and all kind of arguments which protect the Israelis to look at the reality and make the Israelis live in a horrible, horrible denial.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he is in Washington this week. President Trump, at a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, called him the greatest man in the world. Netanyahu said he's working with the United States to find countries that will accept Palestinians who would be forced out of Gaza. He said if they want to leave, they should be able to leave. What is Israel's end goal here?
First of all, there is no end game. There is a wet dream about an ethnic cleansing of Gaza and later on also an ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. I mean, many Israelis dream about the moment in which between the river and the sea, it will be all totally ethnic cleansed, all pure Jewish, but obviously this will never happen. And those dreams are not legitimate dreams. Those dreams are racist, neo-Nazi dreams.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has also nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, what does that tell you when Israel and the United States, I mean, we're talking about two men here, one of whom is wanted on war crimes charges, both of whom are responsible for what the United Nations called a plausible genocide, behave in this way, one nominating the other for a peace prize. Is it not a display of contempt, of cynicism?
Sure it is, and it is a ridiculous game, because first of all, Netanyahu cannot recommend anyone to the Nobel Peace Prize. And the last thing the Nobel Peace Prize Committee will get the recommendation of someone who is wanted for crimes of war. It is all ridiculous. It is all childish, and it shows the level of both of them, by the way. And I hope that nobody takes it seriously. I mean, I for sure don't take it seriously. This whole dinner last night was one big flattering dinner, and God knows based on what. But I don't think that people take it too seriously.
You know, one of the goals we hear from the United States about this meeting or this visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu is that they will seek a ceasefire in Gaza. But even if there is a ceasefire, what is the future for Gaza? I mean, will there always be an Israeli military presence there? Will that presence be permanent there?
Gaza is no present and right now has no future. Nobody gives any answer what will happen on the day after. Nobody gives an answer who is going to run Gaza. Nobody puts any kind of attention to the fact that Gaza is the biggest open prison in the world for the last 18, 19 years. And above anything else, this should come to an end. I mean, the rule of Hamas should come to an end, maybe. The fact that Gaza is a cage should necessarily be the first thing to end. But, you know, it's a whistle in the darkness. Nobody pays attention. Nobody really cares about the people of Gaza. For sure, not politicians in the world. And therefore, Israel can continue with its policy without paying any price.
Right, you say nobody cares for Gaza, even the politicians in the world. A large amount of criticism has been directed at the United States for what is happening in Gaza, and that is because the United States is the primary supporter of Israel, diplomatically, militarily, financially. But what about the fact that there doesn't seem to be much in the way of a protest coming from European leaders?
Even if there is protest, it is mainly a popular protest. It's a protest of the civil society. The governments don't bother to do anything. And above all, we should remember protest is very important and very impressive, but now it's time for actions, not for talkings, not for condemnations, and not for demonstrations. If the world really cares about Gaza, it should take measures. Without it, Gaza's slaughter, Gaza's bloodbath will not end, will not stop. And for this, you need some courageous governments who are ready to take measures, very similarly to the measures taken toward Russia after invading Ukraine, very similar to the measures which were taken toward the apartheid South Africa. But somehow the world deals with Israel in different tools.
So when you talk about measures and actions that should be taken against Israel to stop what is going on in Gaza, are you referring to things like sanctions, perhaps diplomatic isolation?
What else can it be? I'm against violence, and I know that the only way to put an end to all this is by a real intervention of the world and by making the Israelis, each of us, accountable to what's going on our behalf, and maybe pay a price. Sure, this is a very legitimate tool. It was very efficient with South Africa. Why wouldn't it be efficient with the second apartheid state?
But have not Israelis' negative view of Palestinians been reinforced by what happened on October 7th?
no doubt about it, and I totally understand it. But they took it to an impossible and not legitimate place, because most of the Israelis took it to a place that after the 7th of October, Israel has the right to do whatever it wants. And this is unacceptable, even after the 7th of October. And they took it to a place in which after the 7th of October, it's not legitimate to feel any kind of human feelings toward the sufferer of Gaza. And this is also not legitimate. So the 7th of October was a horrible day with horrible crimes and atrocities, but this does not mean that after the 7th of October, everything is legitimate and Israel can punish Gaza forever.
Israel currently is seen very unfavorably and negatively by the international community, according to a poll that was done by the Pew organization. Unfavorably seen by 62% of those polled against 29%. And if we look here in the United States, only 1 in 3 Democrats, which has traditionally been a base of support for Israel, only 1 in 3 Democrats now views Israel favorably. And you said recently that Israel has turned into a pariah state. What is the overall damage that's been done to Israel and its legitimacy?
I think it's too early to really evaluate this, because those things are just beginning of all kinds of processes which might be very dramatic. We are just in the beginning. The matter of fact is that public opinions all over the world are very stormed by what's happening in Gaza and are blaming Israel for what's happening in Gaza. And this, I think, is the only way to see it. On the other hand, I don't see governments taking measures. It's only right now on the level of public opinions, of civil society. Now, as long as the United States continues to treat Israel as it does, as the darling of the United States and the darling of the West, and as long as Europe is so pale and passive and paralyzed by Donald Trump, I don't see much will change. I mean, it's very nice to see demonstrations calling to free Palestine, but nothing will move as long as the Americans are supporting Israel as they do, automatically and blindly.
We have to leave it there, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
The Israeli journalist Gideon Levy there. For more now perspective, we're joined by Dan Arbell. He's a veteran of the Israeli Foreign Service and currently scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University. Also with us is Khalil Jashan. He is Executive Director of the Arab Center in Washington, D.C. And with us in our newsroom is Edmund Greb. He's an academic and Middle East scholar. Welcome to all of you to the show. Dan Arbell, let me start with you, and I want to ask you for your response to some of the sentiments expressed there by Gideon Levy.
Well, Gideon Levy is a renowned journalist with a very specific set of opinions and ideas that were not created today. He's been advocating for years to end Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. He's been a proponent of the two-state solution. He's been very outspoken on against the Netanyahu government. And so his comments are not new and they're not surprising. And some of them some of his concerns I share. But I do want to take a point with one issue that he raised, and I do not think that the IDF is deliberately targeting innocent civilians, nor is under instructions to do so. Certainly, the approach of the IDF, and I think that in some cases where such things happen, then there is investigations and inquiries, and that may lead in the future to court-martialed and to bring people to justice. But I think that certainly there are problems with how Israel is conducting the war in Gaza, and I myself, in interviews to you, Anan, in recent months, have also said that I think it's time to end this war, and I think it's time to end this tragedy of the people of Gaza. So this is my first reaction to his comments.
Okay, Dan, let's get to some of the diplomatic efforts that are being made right now. As I mentioned, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting Washington right now. He's held meetings at the White House with President Trump, also with Vice President J.D. Vance. He will be meeting members of Congress as well. This is a relatively lengthy visit. He's going to be here for 4 days. What are expectations? What do you think this is about?
Certainly, the visit was born from the idea that the two leaders wanted to kind of celebrate, so to speak, the attack against Iran and its success, and to kind of showcase the determination of the countries to, not to allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But it turned out to happen at a timing when negotiations over a deal to reach a ceasefire in Gaza and get to a hostage release situation were picking up. And so the focus of the visit certainly is a deal in Gaza. And we've heard Special Envoy Witkoff today say that out of the 4 outstanding issues, then most of them were addressed, except for one more issue that needs to be addressed. And there's a 90% agreement on most of the issues. And so Witkoff is going to the region, and hopefully this visit of Netanyahu will allow the U.S. to use its leverage on Israel and to bring to a deal towards the end of the week, perhaps, in which at least the war won't end, but there will be a ceasefire of 60 days, and there will be an additional release of hostages, live and dead. And then move towards a situation that after these 60 days, we get to a situation where we can get to an end of war. So I think that this is the emphasis, and these are the center. These are these are what the talks are centering on, and hopefully we'll see progress in the next few days and leading to an agreement.
Khalil Jashan, what are your views on the diplomatic efforts that are underway right now? There are also talks taking place in Qatar, which has been hosting or mediating these talks. The news out of Qatar is don't expect anything very, very soon. But as Dan just said, there could be a 60-day ceasefire by the end of the week. This would also include, of course, the release of the Israeli hostages that are still being held. What do you think? Could there be a ceasefire?
There could be a ceasefire, but it won't be the type of ceasefire that is needed basically to end this conflict, as Dan just concluded. A ceasefire is a respite to basically rest from these daily bloodlettings and massacres of 40, 50, 60, today 76 people in Gaza continuing on a daily basis. That doesn't make a difference unless there is an agreement of some sort that seeks to end the conflict. And that's precisely that 4th point that Dan just mentioned, that Witkoff referred to. Israel is still refusing, even after this surrealistic, if you will, dinner at the White House and the fake PR that Israel has accepted all aspects of this proposal. Israel is still refusing to end this conflict. And no guarantees have been given by the American side, as requested by Hamas, that at least at the end of the 60-day period, there will be an end to the conflict or negotiations to end this conflict. If this conflict is to continue, whatever ceasefire, which we have seen on many occasions over the past 2 years, and many occasions over the past 77 years in the Arab-Israeli conflict, that ended up in this huge cemetery of ceasefires in the Middle East that ended up keeping the conflict going and the parties still at each other's neck.
Edmund Greb, President Trump says he wants to see the Gaza crisis, in his words, solved. I mean, what do you expect to come out of this visit by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? The key, as Khalil pointed out, is in what Trump does, isn't it?
There's no doubt that President Trump has a big role to play. He has said that he wanted to be tough with Netanyahu this time. So far, we haven't seen that. But we have seen actually sending military aid, financial aid, and continuing to praise Netanyahu. But at the same time, I think he has also made some positive statements. He said that the Hamas wants peace, Netanyahu wants peace, and we want peace, and we want to end the suffering of the Palestinian people, of the people of Gaza, actually. And so at least there seems to be an effort, some kind of an effort being made to bring about an end to this conflict. But the problem is, however, is that the Israeli leadership does not yet seem to want a permanent ceasefire. They want a temporary ceasefire. A senior Israeli official told Axios that if the Gaza and Hamas and the Palestinians don't accept a temporary ceasefire, then we are going to turn Gaza into dust. And also, he was saying, we must have the Rafah corridor. And basically, that means continued occupation. So that is going to be very difficult to bridge. And so that's why I think there is a need for a real effort and a clearer position by President Trump and the U.S. administration.
Dan, at that White House dinner on Monday night, we also heard the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump talk about moving Palestinians out of Gaza and having other countries taking them in. Is that the ultimate Israeli goal?
So I think, first of all, we need to we don't hear President Trump repeating anymore his idea for evacuation from Gaza, which I think is a good thing. I think Israel is clinging to this idea of trying to move people, all Gazans, to an area that will be kind of a humanitarian area in the Rafah area. And I think that spells trouble. And I think right now, that's the official line from the Prime Minister. I don't know how feasible it is. I don't know how realistic this is, but at least for the sake of pronouncing a Israeli policy, this is what we're hearing. It's sure, and it has to do with why there's no agreement yet, because the outstanding issue, as Khalil has mentioned, is this whole idea of the corridor known as the Morag corridor that Israel refuses to withdraw from. And that has to do with that whole idea of a humanitarian area which Israel wants to move all Gazans towards. So I think that this is in the give and take between the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no coincidence that there were no full press conferences as we got used to in recent months. And the reason is that there's no consensus between the U.S. and Israel. While on the outside they play nice, I think there's many differences between them, and I think the U.S. at a certain point their patience is running out, and I think that they will let Netanyahu know if they see Netanyahu moving away from agreeing to a ceasefire for hostage release deal or obstructing it. So I think that we will have to see in the coming days how this plays out.
Okay, Khalil, what is your view on this plan, what the Israelis call creating a humanitarian city on the ruins of the Palestinian city of Rafah that would initially house 600,000 Palestinians and ultimately 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza?
Mm-hmm. Well, I find it vulgar, indeed, particularly coming from a population of the state of Israel that suffered from the Holocaust. To me, when you talk about the Morag corridor, which is a second, if you will, tier or parallel to the Philadelphia route that we are familiar with, the idea here is to link that area between Khan Yunis and Rafah and create a camp. Essentially, I would call it the Rafah ghetto. This is reminiscent of a period in history that all of us, Jews, Israelis, Palestinians, Americans, others would like to forget. But that's essentially what you just alluded to in your question, to squeeze almost 2 million people in this little corridor and somehow expect that a peace will happen, even if, as Netanyahu said, those who do not want to leave are welcome to stay. We're not going to force them to leave. But still, I think what he said yesterday, he's going to try to force as many to leave as possible, whether by force or by pressure. and the rest are not going to be free. They are going to be basically gathered in this area, and as we have seen, basically starved to death. And that's not a formula for peace. This is a Rafah ghetto in the World War II concept of ghettos.
Edmund Greb, as I said earlier, the visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu is relatively long. He's going to be here for 4 days. He's met the senior leaders, the top leaders in this country, President Trump as well as Vice President J.D. Vance. He will be holding talks with congressional leaders as well. So he's doing the entire round. What are your expectations of what will be announced when he leaves?
I believe that they are still working on some points of disagreement. And that's why there was a report today that Witkoff may delay his trip to Qatar. Now we'll see what happens there. But I think the administration wants to end this. I think also there was another issue that was discussed, which is a question of Iran. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and some of his advisors are concerned because it seems that the administration might be willing to reach some kind of an agreement, and there's going to be a meeting. At least there will be some communication and contacts and negotiations. Perhaps it's going to be in Oslo. So that is also something that might be of concern to the Israelis. But at the same time, I think also Prime Minister Netanyahu was aware that the world's view, many the opinion all over the world is changing. But he said this was what was being said about Israel was all lies, and that the best way to combat it is with the truth, while in fact it may be the other way around. But the problem is that right now, I don't think the administration is ready yet to put real pressure on Netanyahu.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.